Guys, today's video is going to be about wise decisions and how making good choices will affect your life. And when you know something's right or wrong, doing it, whether you ignore your conscience or ignore your own self, whatever it is, doing the right thing, because it matters. It makes a big difference in your life, and you will directly reap the results of your decisions that you make. So, just to think about this, the Bible tells us to not be hasty in making decisions and to think about stuff. Don't be irrational. But they also tells us in other ways, when there's when you have an issue with someone in the way, right? You're supposed to figure it out quickly. So it means make a decision then and there. Because sometimes if you wait forever, your decision might turn out to come back and be even worse for you than what it was. So it talks all about different ways of making decisions and this or that, but mostly what it tells you is that sometimes you can trust your gut and sometimes you can't. Sometimes you might meet a really pretty girl and everything goes great and she seems awesome, and you guys come back to your place or her place or whatever, and one thing leads to another, and now you gotta decide, hey, everything went really good with this girl. Should I sleep with her? Should I do that with her? And then let's say you make the right decision if you're not married to her, which is not to do that. And then, you protect yourself. You protect yourself from having a baby out of wedlock, or, maybe she's insane. Maybe she turns out to be crazy. And now you protected yourself from being around someone like that. Maybe you can find out. Maybe she has a boyfriend that you didn't know about and she's cheating. Who knows? Maybe she's a great person. It's just now your families aren't going to be happy. You did things the wrong way. God tells us to do things a certain way. We're supposed to do things a certain way. And so you should listen. But my point is, I'm just talking about here, is that your decisions matter. You can't just think whatever. You will make wrong decisions, but then you have more decisions after that you got to make. And those decisions will affect, your outcomes to things that genuinely affect you and whatever else. But every decision you make, affects the next one, and affects the next day of your life, affects the next year of your life, could affect the next 18 years of your life, or forever. You get in one road rage incident and suddenly, now you're in jail because you shot someone, or you ran someone off the road, or you crashed your car, or whatever it was. I mean, there's all kinds of decisions that will genuinely mess you up. And so you got to think about things when you do it. If you do something, just remember you have to answer for it. And it's the same way that if you don't do something, it's like if your mom asks you to clean the house and then you don't, you're gonna get in trouble. Or maybe you do it, but you do a crappy job, now you gotta do it twice. Think about everything in life is just a decision. And we have them every day, whether it's big or small, whether it's this or that, what you eat for lunch, whatever. But there's always a wise one, and there's always a right and a wrong. There's always just kind of an in-between. And you got to try to pick the right one every single time, because that's going to be the best thing for your life. Personally, I try to make my own decisions, and then you can make, where I'm going with this one is that you can make decisions on your own, or you can make them using the logic that God taught us, the kind of morals in life that He told us to live. God tells us to live a certain way and to do a certain things and to be who we are and whatever else. But He calls us, don't have premarital sex, be nice to others. If you have an issue in the way with someone, figure it out then, because they might come back later and it'd be 10 times worse for you. I mean, all kinds of great examples of stuff like that in the Bible. And like Abraham, this morning I read about how he made a decision. God Himself put up His son and said, Jesus, who is God, right? Himself, pretty much. He put Him up and said, I'll sacrifice myself for all of humanity. But earlier in the Bible, He asked Abraham, would you sacrifice your son for me, or to me, or whatever? And Abraham does. Abraham says, all right, yeah, I'll sacrifice my son to you. And so Abraham raises the knife, has his son up on an altar, and God calls out and says, stop. No, I would never let you do that. I wouldn't even allow it to happen, And what God wanted to see is that he made the right decision, that he would have followed through with what he said. and God wanted to see that his heart was pure and honest and true, and that when he said he was going to do something, he'd do it. And that decision, you know, I look at that and sometimes I think, man, if Abraham wouldn't have done that, would Jesus have came? Maybe, you know, maybe he would have, probably, you know, is prophesied. But what if he decided, you know what, these humans, they don't care about me, whatever else, they're all evil. He just flooded the earth and he killed everyone, and that was the end of humanity. But he didn't. You know, a decision was made and it had an outcome. You know, that's just a rash thing that may not even be like very biblically accurate or anything. But what I'm just saying is that your decisions make your life and they make other people's lives. You know, if you choose to be a jerk to your parents every day, you're gonna make their lives miserable. Why would you want someone else's life to be miserable? I don't care if you're happy or not. Why drag someone else into being upset and miserable with you? Why not just be nice to your parents, make their lives better, you know? And then by them being happier, I'm sure your life will be happier. And it's just, there's tons of outcomes that people, I don't know, people don't think about things. Sometimes you should slow down and think about something. So many people go buy new cars. It's like, if you really thought about your decision, I highly doubt 90% of people, financially, ethically, whatever, should be out buying a new car. You know, if you have to buy a new car, you have to go out and finance a Hyundai or a Kia or something for like 7 years. Yeah, you're probably buying the wrong car. If you're one of those guys that needs a brand new F-250 Platinum so you can raise it, never tow anything but its big girlfriend, I'm joking, right? That's a joke, right? Sorry, I get a little crass sometimes. But, and then you got like a $3,000 a month payment, and that's like more than a mortgage. It's just stupid. You can go buy nice used cars. Yeah, it might not be fancy, it might not be what you want, but it'll do the same job, and it's more responsible, and you'll reap the benefits later of getting a nicer house. Or maybe now you have a truck that does what it does, but it's not cool, or a car that's not as nice or new, didn't have a warranty. Well, maybe you can learn a new skill, like learn to change your own oil, learn to change your own battery and alternator, like small things. If you don't know how to work on cars, you know, whatever. But people are so much more capable of stuff. It's just that they don't know. They don't make the decision to try to learn things. They don't make the effort. It's a lot about effort too. You know, how much effort are you willing to put in? Because you can really reap the benefit of so much in life just by putting in effort. So many people don't put any effort into anything, and their lives are just it's like you're shooting yourself in your foot and then trying to run a marathon. It's just not going to go well. You're not making a good decision. But all I'm saying is that your decisions matter. Jesus made a lot of decisions. He said, like, you know, one decision here, one decision there, it can change people. Like, your decision to preach the gospel to someone could save that person from being in hell for all eternity. Your decision to make whatever might lead you to a life that follows Jesus really good, or a life that just completely ignores him. And you don't want to be in a life that just completely ignores God. The world is a bad place. The world tells you to make decisions that lead you farther and farther away from God. You know, TV tells you to make all kinds of terrible decisions. Influencers tell you to make bad decisions. Some tell you to make right decisions, but then you look at their things they have and all that, and you get jealous and greedy or whatever, and you say, I want to have all the same stuff. Well, you may not have as much money, you may not be in the same spot in life, whatever it is. It's just, all I'm trying to say here is that your decisions are going to affect your life, so think about them carefully. When I went to college, my decision for a degree, I didn't know what I wanted to do forever. I kind of looked up at being an airline pilot only because when I scrolled through the degrees at the college I went to, I said, man, all of these look terrible. Why am I going to college? None of these will be a job or have anything to do with anything that I would enjoy. And then I saw the pilot one. I was like, oh, that one looks kind of fun. I'll just click that and change it later. And then I started looking into it, and I realized, oh, maybe this is something that I want to do. Maybe I want to become an airline pilot. Maybe the pay is great and the life is great, and this is like would fit me. It would fit all my hobbies and everything else. So I became an airline pilot, and I stuck with it. But my decision making is that, oh, I'll try it out for a semester, and if I don't like it, I'll quit and I'll change. But then I went to school and I realized, oh, now I gotta make a decision. Am I gonna stay with it? Because the campus was an hour and a half away from the main one, and It was entirely, you know, all the classes were there. I wasn't even really going to the main school, but I was going to the other one. And so it was like, it was all a shock. And I was an idiot that did no research ahead of time. And I was making these on-the-fly stupid decisions that never were meant to be made the way I was making them, or never should be made the way I was making them. And it's just something to think about. There's so much in life that you should really take seriously that people don't. You know, your partner, who you marry and all, if they're a bad person, leave them. It's better to be alone than to be with someone who's a bad person. So many guys, the first girl that will talk to them or stay around them or whatever, they just go with, because they don't think they'll ever meet someone else. It's so hard for guys to meet women and stuff like that. They almost just give up and say, well, if this one will stay, then I'll keep her, and then she'll cheat on him and lie and all this, and they just will never make that decision to give it up and trust that God will bring a better person in their life. So many people are like that. I have friends like that. I was like that myself. And sometimes God will just let you sit in your own suffering, and you'll be your punishment might be that he grants you whatever you ask for. And if you want to do that, then maybe he'll let you, and then your life will suck, and you'll end up either living a miserable life or being divorced or whatever, and you never know. It's just that stuff, it's serious. You know, I don't know, I'm just saying things should be taken very seriously, because it matters. Stuff matters way more than you might think. And then on the next thing, it's that, you know, your decisions affect other people. They could affect someone's outcome in life. You know, if you go around saying you're a Christian and then don't ever live like it. I mean, think about Togi, that influencer guy. He said when he met Bryce Crawford, he was like, you know, I've met so many people that say they're Christian, but you're the only one I've ever seen that actually lives out like it. Maybe one other guy. He's like, maybe one other person, I guess, does, but you and him are the only two people I ever see that actually live like it. It seems impossible and all this. And it's like, well, maybe if we're all calling ourselves Christian and no one's making the decision to act like a Christian, that's a terrible thing. I don't know, I'm just rambling now, but it's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful area. Make good decisions. You know, it's your life. Do you really want to have a miserable life? The way God lays out the 10 Commandments and sins and all that, the way he tells us to live, you know, he's like a father that wants the best for us. And that's crazy to think about. Sorry, my hand's getting tired. But that's crazy to think about. But seriously, Jesus is like a good dad who just wants the best for us. And if you listen to the stuff he says, then you're like staying in the protection of the living God, and life is so much easier. In some ways it's hard, you know, it's hard doing some of the things Jesus says, but you reap the benefits of it at the same time. It's like putting in a lot of work and building a really nice house, but then you get to live in it. You know, you could go buy a crappy house made at Home Depot, tiny home, and then watch it fall apart, and it's a lot easier maybe. I don't know. Stupid examples. I'm just rambling on and on, but yeah. Make good decisions. I mean, your life depends on it. The decision to follow Christ is a big one, and you should make the decision to follow him every day, not sometimes, not half the time. I mean, God is always God. He's never not God. So don't go out making decisions that separate you from the living God when you know the repercussions of them. It's like, why would you do that? I don't know. I did it myself, but I came back to God. Now I do my best to stay close to him. So count the cost, you know, of what the decision would cost and what it means, you know. If you're a guy who's addicted to jorking it or whatever, you know, count the cost. Make the decision. Is it worth separation from Jesus, sinning, you know? Jesus paid the price for that sin that you're about to do, you know. Is it worth it? Make the decision. You tell me. That's a wild example, but I'm just saying. Alright, that's it for today, guys. Any comments, questions, whatever, just leave them down there, and I will respond or make a video about whatever you guys want. Wish you guys the best. I'll see ya.